Hello and welcome to Unstress Health. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Now, when we are in conversation with people, just casually, socially, we often want to get to know them, and one of the first questions, apart from what do you do, is something about their family too. Have you got any brothers or sisters? Where do you sit in the family? What's the age difference between your brothers and sisters? Well, birth order. Birth order turns out to have a lot more significance than just a social interaction, although those social interactions give us a clue that we instinctively feel there's a kind of relevance there to it and a fascination by the dynamics of it. Well, my guest today has explored that personally and professionally for over 50 years. Dr. Robert Hurst, a Harvard graduate who served on the dental schools of both Tufts University and Louisiana State University. He's run a private orthodontics practice. Yes, he's an orthodontist for over 50 years in Covington, Louisiana. And it was during his practice that he decided to study the birth orders of his patients and their behavior patterns. Now, he's written a book called Life's Fingerprint, Your Birth Order. Now, Dr. Robert, has had the opportunity to see functioning children in the real world on a day-to-day basis over the last 50 years, adjusting to life and its challenges. And he's seen the expression, this is where it gets really interesting, he's seen the expression of birth orders firsthand and has learned that your birth order impacts every part of your life. Now, the information it is said allows you to better evaluate your own behavior and the behavior of others by understanding those various nuances of birth order. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Dr. Robert Hurst. Welcome to the show, Dr. Bob.
Thank you, Dr. Ron.
Bob, we were just talking before we came on about the fact that we've been in dentistry for quite a few years, several decades, and I've been a holistic biological dentist for almost all of my 45 years in practice. But birth order, as it relates to dentistry, is a whole new area. I mean, obviously, everybody, when you meet somebody, your brother or sister, which are your oldest, youngest, birth order is part of our conversation. But tell us from your perspective, what is birth order?
Well, the simplest explanation is your order of birth in your family. But that's way too simple. Okay. Because, as you say, you're a holistic dentist. I might say I might be a holistic orthodontist because I have to look at the patient and the family, and that's the whole picture. And just because you were the firstborn or the secondborn or the thirdborn, that really doesn't cut it, because there are extenuating circumstances that change your relationship to your brothers and sisters in the family. But the simplistic way to look at birth order is, well, let me back up a second and say it really started with Alfred Adler, who was a contemporary of Freud. In fact, they were in the same psychoanalytical society. And Freud felt that your personality was developed from your relationship with your parents. And Adler said, I think your relationship with your parents isn't as important as a relationship with your siblings. And that's what I think develops your personality. Well, of course, they didn't get along. They had two different views. And believe it or not, Freud was the oldest in his father's second family, and Adler was the second child in his family. So they weren't about to get along anyway. So they split and they separated, and Adler went on with his ideas, and of course Freud went on with his. But what I said was the simplest way is to look at your relationship with your siblings. And there are few things that happen that will change what your real birth order is. For instance, the spacing between the children. If it's just individual spacing, a one has one characteristics and a two, first of all, the one starts life as an only child. So he doesn't become, or she doesn't become, a firstborn until the secondborn is born. And that's when sibling rivalry shows up, because the secondborn wants the firstborn's position, and the firstborn wants to protect his position. So he wants to protect the throne. And so these first two birth orders can be very antagonistic to each other. And that's good in a way, but too much is not good. Because if number one just crushes number two doesn't have a place. And every child wants their special place in the family. And if number two dethrones number one, he's just lost and he can just drop out. So it's best that there's some competition, but not too much. So that's the first characteristic we have to look at. What is the spacing between the children? Now, the next thing would be, what if there's stepbrothers and sisters in the family? Well, it just depends on their age and their relationship to the family structure. So you can bring a stepbrother or sister into that family if they're living together, and that changes everybody's birth order based on their ages. And then you want to see where the children are living. You know, sometimes a child ends up living with the grandparents, and they're not in that family structure. So that changes it. And of course, what if there's handicapped siblings? That changes the relationship of the children. In other words, if number two is a handicapped child, number one doesn't get the attention that they thought they should be getting, but they can't say anything. So they have this deep resentment because they're caught and they can't say anything about that handicapped second child. So there's also the death of a sibling. If you have a death of a sibling, and this is all before you're 16 years old, then everybody moves up a position. Now that does happen later in life too, that even though, let's say that you're a third born and your second born dies, you're still a third born with your qualities, but you have to take over the job of the second born. You have to move up. So you pretend to do the second born's job, but you're really a third born. So all these things interact in finding what we call your real birth order. There's about 7 characteristics that we look at. Adopted children, twins do have a birth order. So it's not so simple to just say, oh, you're a 1 or you're a 2. We have to look at these other characteristics to pin you down, so to speak.
So, I mean, this spacing that occurs, I mean, the combinations that are now available or that we are confronted with, particularly in our modern world, are sort of almost infinite. Well, they're not infinite, but there are many different combinations of not just spacing, but combinations of families, and the difference between a 1-year-old difference and a 4-year-old difference between even just 2 siblings is profound. And it kind of assumes Adler, I mean, I'm assuming this is Adler's kind of thing about rivalry being a key aspect to position within the family. And that's an interesting point to make. Rivalry is a key issue. But
yes, and you can ask questions like, usually the firstborn is excellent in school and the secondborn is going to be your athlete. In other words, they don't take the same job. And you can ask the question, if you say, well, was your older brother good in school? Or they say, oh, no, he was the athlete. Well, then you know immediately that number 2 dethroned number 1.
Wow,
and number 2 becomes the student.
You've just stopped me in my breath there, because I'm the youngest of 2, and I would have always said my brother was a much better athlete than me.
Well, you may have dethroned him.
Oh, gee, I hope he's not listening to this podcast. This is going to open up a whole can of worms.
But what was interesting was that, as an orthodontist, I realized early in my career that cooperation from teenagers determined my success in orthodontic treatment, because I needed their cooperation.
Oh, okay.
And I found, treating many children from the same family, that they were all different and they didn't want to be the same. So I realized I needed to find a way in the first few minutes of meeting them to find out what I was up against in their treatment. Okay. So that's why I got interested in birth order.
Yeah, okay.
And so I looked at the characteristics of the number 1, the number 2, the number 3, and the number 4. Of course, they're the only child too. And it worked about a third of the time. It just wasn't working, and I was ready to throw out the whole concept. And then I said, I'm going to do a little research on these families. And I went through about 1,000 patients, and I looked at the brothers and sisters, and I looked at the spacing. And I came to the realization that 2/3 of my patients were separated by their brothers and sisters by at least 4 years. And so we came up with the concept of the double birth order. So you see, if a 1 and a 2 are separated by 4 years, they don't really communicate with each other because their friends are 4 years difference in age. So the 1 becomes a super 1 or a 1 only, and the 2 becomes a super 2 or a 2 only. So all of a sudden, I realized that was the Rosetta Stone of understanding everybody.
Interesting.
Because all these patients, when I found 2/3 of them had double birth orders, then everything fit. Everything fell into place. Now, there's another type of double birth orders too. It's when there's 2 groups of children in the family. For
Now,
instance,
Robert, just let me stop you. Double birth order, just define that term for us. Double
it's
birth
it's
order.
it's when there are 4 or more years
Okay.
between siblings or
Okay.
groups of siblings.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example of another type of double birth order. It's when there's 2 groups of children in a family. Let's say the first 2 children are a couple years apart. Then there's a 4-year gap, and then there's 2 more children.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that third child becomes the oldest in the second family. So
Okay.
they have a 1 and a 3 birth order. And I'll tell you, someone that you know has that or had that was Princess Di. She
Uh-huh.
had 2 older sisters. Then there was a big gap. And then she was born, and then her brother was born after her. So
Mm-hmm.
she was a 3-1, and her brother was a 4-2. So when people have double birth orders, they show 2 types of characteristics, not at the same time. So you get, twice for your money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so once you understand the double birth order on these 2 types, everybody everybody can be diagnosed. You can find the unhidden. If you can just tap in to this birth order, it's going on behind the scenes. It's in everything you do. It's your auto mechanic, it's your patient, it's your wife, it's your children. And if you understand this, you take away stress. I mean, if you understand stress is a killer, if you
Mm-hmm.
understand birth order, I eliminated all the stress in my practice. I have no stress. I
Okay.
know how these children are going to respond. I know that the fourth child, who's the true baby in the family, is going to drop his appointment card on the way out of the office. And
Nice.
then another sibling will pick it up and take care of it for him. So I don't expect the same behavior from all my patients, which is
Mm-hmm.
really takes the stress out.
Okay. Yeah, you are in orthodontics predominantly, I assume, dealing with children and children under the age of what would be your percentage of your practice that is
Well,
child
Well, they're
focused?
they're basically teenagers, the seventh and eighth grade, which is a terrible age to deal with.
Mm,
11 to 13,
yeah.
boys and girls. But we see a lot of adults too, and you don't change. Your birth order as an adult is your same behaviors are the same as that as a child. For instance, the number 3 child, they have to understand 17 different relationships when they're born between their older siblings and their parents. There's about 17. These number 3s are great with groups of people. By the way, those are the great dental assistants because
Okay.
they like the chaos in the office doesn't bother them. They understand everything intuitively.
Mm,
I recall one of my patients, he was about a 6'5", 230-pound man. He was a number 3, and he was scared to death. And I told him, look, we're going to use very, very light forces, and it's not going to be that uncomfortable. He says, oh boy, that makes me feel so much better because I thought that this was going to be very, very painful. And I'd heard about this. And some people think just because I'm a big guy, I don't feel pain, but I feel pain a lot. And that is exactly true. It doesn't make any difference. It's your birth order that tells you who you're really dealing with.
so this is interesting to draw this line at 4 years because I think I'm always interested in ancestral um, relationships, what we can learn from our ancestors. And I think the distance between siblings would always have been, because of practicality, at least 3 or 4 years. You wouldn't have had two kids under two in the tribe of hunter and gatherers, I don't think, because you would have, you wouldn't have been able to deal with it. You would have had, you'd been breastfeeding for a long time. I think I'm right in saying in ancestral cultures, a bigger age difference is not unusual. Is that a fair observation? What do you think?
Yes, it's true. And it's with birth order, each person in the line has a specific strategy to get what they need. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it starts over again at 5. 5 is just like a number 1. It's like primary and secondary colors. It's the same, but it's less intense. So a 5 is like a 1, a 6 is like a 2, a 7 is like a 3. So when you have these, 9 children in a family, by the time the 5th one comes around, he can use the same strategies as number 1, but he's a little more mellow, so to speak. But you do get gaps sometimes, and you end up with double birth orders, even in families from years ago. I'll give you an example, like Alfred Hitchcock. Everyone remembers him. He was a 3 only birth order. When you add the only to a birth order, you magnify, intensify all those characteristics. So a 3 is very intuitive, and they're very sensitive, and they feel things. But when you add the only to it, they become manipulative.
Now, hang on, you got me with the 3. He's the third in line in his family.
Yes.
But
Yes.
only meaning that's where it stopped at 3?
No, it's because there was a gap between number 2 and number 3 of at least 4 years.
Okay.
So
Three
this child
only,
gets
okay.
raised like an only child because the other 2 children aren't even in the house. They're at school. So he
Okay.
gets all these only qualities, which is the only qualities say, I can do it. I'm an adult. I'm strong. It adds power.
Right.
So, 3 to the power of 10. So, Alfred Hitchcock was very manipulative
Okay.
of all his people. And he manipulated us with his movies.
He did. So we've got the critical age of 4 years, where you then get the add-on only monicon. So you could be a 2 only if you were more than 4 years older than your first sibling. But what happens the opposite way when we get 1 year separating the 2 children, or less than 2 years? I know I've got grandchildren that are 2 years apart, and another twins are on their way. So, and they're all going to be 4 under 4. Wow. What does that present?
Well, there's 2 types of families. There's one where it's less than 4 years between the siblings. And so it's a real family of kids. One, they want to be in charge and make all the rules. And number 2 doesn't want to be told what to do. They're thought to be stubborn, but they're not stubborn. They just don't want to be told what to do by number 1. And then there's number 3, who watches the antics between number 1 and number 2, and they kind of instigate things. And then number 4 is a true baby in the family. And that's a family, and everybody, gets along, and they toilet train each other and whatever. But when you separate them by 4 or more years, you get individual families, and they don't communicate with each other. And some parents say, well, we want to separate our children so we have the resources to give them orthodontic treatment. And that's what I found out, that 2/3 of my patients were all separated, and those are the ones that were getting the orthodontic treatment because they weren't, so close together that the families didn't have any resources to, pay for treatment. So it was just a matter of, it was odd that it happened, but because it happened, I was able to find that Rosetta Stone to unmask everybody.
Right.
Which was great.
Hi, Dr. Ron here, and I want to invite you to join our Unstress Health community. Now, like this podcast, it's independent of industry and focuses on taking a holistic approach to human health and to the health of the planet. The two are inseparable. There are so many resources available with membership, including regular live Q&As on specific topics with special guests, including many with our amazing Unstress Health Advisory Panel. Now, we've done hundreds of podcasts, all worth listening to, with some amazing experts on a wide range of topics. Many are world leaders. But with membership, we have our Unstress Lab podcast series, where we take the best of several guests and carefully curate specific topics for episodes which are jam-packed full of valuable insights. So join the Unstress Health community. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, click on the link below or just visit unstresshealth.com to see what's on offer and join now. I look forward to connecting with you. So, okay, you've got this, you started intrigued by birth order and it worked in a third of cases until you uncovered this Rosetta Stone of the 4-year difference, which kind of made sense because the other 2/3 that it didn't work for suddenly did. How do you use birth order in your orthodontic practice? I mean, you've got the information about birth order and the spacing between them. And I'm guessing, I mean, you are making also, well, hang on, let's take a step back. What's the evidence for these different characteristics that you're making assumptions for?
Well, if you want to say, where's the evidence? Well, I'll give you a few.
Okay.
Start with your photo album of the family. The firstborn will have all the pictures. The secondborn will have less. The thirdborn, fewer. And the fourthborn's lucky to have a picture at all. You know, every so many years we do a thing at the office where we put our baby pictures up on the counter and we have the patients try to identify who's who.
Yep.
Of course, one of my staff said, you know, Dr. Hurst, there's going to be easy to find you. I said, what do you mean? We're all baby pictures out here. She said, no, yours is going to be the only one in black and white.
Okay.
But anyway, you look at the family photo album. That's the first one you can see. Then go back to your high school reunion, 25-year of high school reunion. Everybody's the same. There's no difference. They haven't changed. They're the same people. How about your Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner? When all the family gets together, everybody takes the same role they had as when they were kids in the family. Okay, if you were the baby, you're going to be at the little kids' table, you know. The kings of England really started this whole thing because the firstborn was going to get the kingdom. And the secondborn had to find his own way, you know. But sometimes the secondborn did away with the firstborn and took over the castle. Okay, so, you know, these things have been around for a long time. You know, it even is true in nature. In nature, the cuckoo, now, you have cuckoos down in Australia, don't you?
Yeah,
yes. The cuckoo is kind of a parasitic bird. It deposits its egg in another bird's nest. Now, the bird that it deposited in is much smaller than the cuckoo. And for some reason, once that happens, the cuckoo's egg hatches first. And when the other birds hatch, or they don't hatch, the cuckoo pushes the eggs out of the nest. And so the cuckoo becomes the only child because he needs to get all the food from this smaller parent. Wow. So birth order is in nature, really is in nature. And what are we? But we're part of nature too.
Sure. So how are you using this in the orthodontic practice? I mean, you've got the Rosetta Stone now. You've removed stress from your practice because you know. Go on, tell us what you know from this.
Okay, here's how it works. If I have an only child that comes in, I treat that only child like an adult. I don't treat them like a child because everything I say will go right back to the parent, or anything the assistant says to me or I say to her, they'll say to the parent, and the parent will believe them 100% that it's exactly true. Whatever they say, they believe them because they consult with their child. They're on the same level. If I have a number one patient, that patient will usually be very cooperative and follow the rules. because the parents say, do what the doctor says. If I have a number 2 patient, I'm going to explain everything I'm going to do before I do it, because he doesn't want to be told what to do. He doesn't want a something that is unknown to him that's going to happen to him. He wants to know what's going to happen. And then if it's a number 3 child, we're going to be very, very gentle. And with number 3, we call them laughing on the outside, crying on the inside. They're not going to tell you that they're hurting, because they know that from an older sibling. If they tell the older sibling that, they'll just hit them on the shoulder even harder. So they tend to, mask that. So with the number 3, you have to be, they're very gentle, quiet, intuitive kids. And of course, the number 4, they're just all over the place because they're the baby and everybody takes care of them, and they have a great time, but they're totally unreliable.
Okay. From an orthodontic perspective.
Yes. But now you add that only the double birth order to these things, and you get the first child that is extremely strong. And it's like an only, but it's the firstborn, and they're beyond just they're going to ask you some questions. They're going to be like an adult. The 2, that's an immovable object. The 2 only is an immovable object. If they don't want to do something, they will not do it. They also have an extremely high pain threshold. I've seen these little girls that are 2 onlys. They'll break the sturdiest orthodontic appliance, and not because they did it on purpose. They just have no pain threshold. It's amazing. And the 3 only, well, that's kind of your drama queen, and they want to be the actress in the office, and they want all the attention, and you better give them the attention because that's what they want. So it's just fascinating once you get into this, and everybody falls into kind of a pigeonhole. And like you said before, you can look at your ancestors that you never knew. If we know their birth order, we can describe what they were like.
How do you've mentioned this. I'm intrigued because using birth order in family planning.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, again, if you want a cohesive family, you make them all within 3 years of each other. But if you want individual families, spread them out 4 or more years apart. But know that those double birth orders are going to be very, very strong children. They may be stronger than you. And that happens sometimes. Parents that might be 3s and 4s, their first children, 1 and 2, are stronger than the parents. And they kind of tell the parents what to do. That can happen.
Okay.
Now you said that you're the number 2 in the family?
I am the number 2.
And you have an older brother, just a few years older?
2.5 years older than me.
Okay. And we think perhaps you dethroned him.
Well, I can't wait for him to hear this. But do go on. Do go on. This is music to my ears, Robert. I almost, couldn't have asked for a better guest. But do go on. I've dethroned my older brother. He'll be so pleased to hear this. He'll say, now it all makes sense. Now I understand.
But this really works. I know that as a dentist, you probably have many dentists that are subscribers to your podcast. And if you look in your office, you can see there's certain birth orders that fit certain positions. And I found that true when I would talk to orthodontic offices and things. The only child or the firstborn would be your best person at the front desk. They want to run the show. The firstborn is like the border collie. They want to make all the sheep, stay together and all that stuff. They want to keep tabs on everything. They'll tell everybody what to do. Your accountant and maybe your lab person could be your number 2. They don't want to be told what to do. They have their own little world, and don't mess with it. They'll do their thing and they'll get it done for you. And your number 3s and number 4s are great assistants in the office. They like having the patients coming through and they like all the activity that's going on. And as you know, every birth order can do any job, but I found that over time, they end up in these positions. If they've been working in your office for 20 years, they will end up in the position that fits their birth order. So it's nice if you're hiring people to hire the right birth order for the right position at the beginning, so you don't have to waste your time.
Okay. You're also offering this as an assistance to finding love in your life. I mean, now my wife, for example, is the older sibling, 2.5 years older than her sister, who interestingly was unwell as a child and did take a lot of attention from my wife. But how would I or could I have used that? I mean, I might have really had an insight earlier on than, I did.
Now,
Although I got on
there,
very well with it straight away. If she's listening to this, I just have to put that little caveat in as well.
well, there's two types of love at first sight.
Hmm.
One is to find somebody with your exact same birth order.
Okay.
If you do, you see the same things the same way. I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, I found a duplicate of myself. There's a problem though. You can only have one image in the mirror at a time. So somebody has to step out of the way in the relationship and you have to divide things up. For instance, you might be in charge of world affairs and she might be in charge of cooking dinner. Okay. But you don't want to be doing the same things because you do get on each other's nerves because you're trying to be in the same place at the same time. That's one type. The other type of love at first sight is the kind that I found never, and hard to say never, get divorced. If you match the gender and the position of the opposite sibling in your family, for instance, if you had an older sister
Hmm.
and you ended up marrying someone that was the number one sister that had a number two brother, then you matched. But in your case, your older sibling was a boy.
Hmm.
So you match, but the genders are off.
Okay.
And she matches, but the genders are off because she had a younger sibling. That's
Yeah.
you, but you're not a girl, you're a boy. So
Hmm.
you came as close as you could come because when you have all of the same gender in a family, you can't possibly match perfectly, but you
Mm.
did match the position. So you understand what a number one is like. You don't have to like your number one brother, but you understand what number ones are doing. And
Hmm.
she understands what a number two is up to. So she
Mm.
understands you, you understand her, but the genders are off a little bit.
I'm wondering here, just thinking out aloud and personalizing it all, because her being 2.5 years older than her sister and her sister being unwell very early on in her life, you possibly, I'm using the terminology here, usurping her position as number one. Would that be a
Yes.
fair thing? So she may have assumed a number two position, albeit reluctantly, but she accepted it. And so here we were, both me, a real number two, and she, a usurped number one, masquerading as accepting as a number two. We may well have been a perfect match.
Boy, you are a quick study, but I'm going to take it a step further.
Okay.
You dethroned your brother, so you became a number
Uh,
one
yeah.
with number two characteristics, and she became a number one acting like a number two with number one characteristics.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you see how birth order works?
Yeah.
I
Oh,
mean, you
well.
are a quick study.
Well, Robert, Bob, I mean, just hearing you keep saying that I usurped my brother's number one position, we could just repeat that on a loop on this podcast,
Over
and
and
I'd
over
and I'd be
again.
happy. I'd be happy with that. But
Yes,
okay,
you got it.
yeah, yeah, interesting. But if we were 4 years apart as siblings, then we would be almost like only children. And that's another
Yes.
one, isn't it? I mean, only children are stereotypically, you mentioned you've got to treat them like an adult.
Yes.
But stereotypically, only children are very independent, very self-centered, as they have to be
Yes.
growing up.
Every birth order has two sides to it.
Hmm.
And the only child is not an exception. They're either, in life, they either want many, many children in their family or they want none. They want many children because they grew up and they felt so alone and they want to give their parents all these grandchildren, or they don't want any children. See, there's two sides to everybody,
Sure.
okay? Which is kind of interesting. So, I mean, you're getting it.
Now, it is interesting, this subject, because when you are standing around, you meet somebody, one of the first questions, oh, you come from a big family? Yeah. Do you have any brothers or sisters? Oh, yeah. Where do you fit in? That is almost stereotypically the beginning of so many human conversations. So is that how we become? I mean, how do we become birth order detectives? Because, like more than just asking those questions, it's what we do
Well,
with the answers, isn't it?
yes, it's good. I have a lot of questions with companies that use this with their HR department to try to find the right birth orders for the right jobs within it. And I say,
Wow.
well, we have rules here that we can't violate the Federal Employment Act and ask certain questions. And I said, this is very easy to do. This is how we do it. You say, just like you said, you say, well, did you come from you have brothers and sisters? And everybody says, oh, yes, I have an older brother. And you say, well, were you just a few years apart? Oh, no, 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 no. There's 8 years between us. Now you got your answer. And you didn't violate any rules. Now you know you're dealing with a two only, or an only two, because it's 8 years, and more only than two. And
Yeah.
that's how you get around it. It's kind
Yeah.
of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because in
I'll tell you
America,
another,
yeah, go on,
I'll tell
go on,
you
tell me
another
another.
quick story about an only child. I was doing some consulting work for a barge company, and the secretary was telling me the story that she was down in Miami, I think it was, waiting for a flight with her boss, and they were sitting at a cafe, and he had ordered a Dr. Pepper, and she had never had a Dr. Pepper, so she said to him, "Could I have a sip of your Dr. Pepper?" And he says, "No, I'm an only child and I don't share." She said, "I couldn't believe it." I said, "Believe it. He's an only child."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So listen, it is a fascinating topic, and it's one that clearly, we intuitively are interested in. So it would be great to get a little more information about this. How would we find out more on this? How would we get more information on this subject, Dr. Bob?
Well, you could go to our website, mybirthorder.com,
Yep.
and there's some blogs on there and there's some information, but we also have a little store in there where we have uh, my book, Life's Fingerprint, How Birth Order Affects Your Path Through Life. But we also have it, since you're a long way away, we have it on a USB card like this, has all the pictures and things on it. So it would probably travel through the mail better. And you can
Hmm.
plug it into your computer and it has all the pictures and everything that are in the book. Actually, there's two versions to the book. The one that we have on the site, you can only get on the site, which is hardcover and it's in full color. And I've got a section in the back that has questions that I've been asked at meetings and things. Whereas the other one, I think it's on Amazon, it's paperback and it's black and white and it doesn't have that section on it.
Okay.
But that's another place to get it all.
Now, listen, before we finish, I'm going to ask you one other question, and
Sure.
I want you to take a step back from your role as an orthodontist and your obvious interest in birth order, although perhaps this is the answer to this question, and that because we're all individuals on a health journey in this modern world, and taking a step back from your role as an orthodontist, what do you think the biggest challenge is for us as individuals on that journey to better health or to stay healthy?
Well, I think the way to better health is to eliminate stress in your life. Stress is the killer. It increases your blood pressure. It does all kinds of bad things to the body. And if you understood birth order, because birth order makes you understand all the people in your life. And once you understand that, you don't treat everyone the same, just like you don't treat all your patients the same, and your expectations are different, especially for your children and in life, and that will eliminate your stress. So I do everything to eliminate stress in my life.
Wow.
And that's what I would say.
Well, that's a great message for us to finish on, particularly on a podcast called Unstress Health. So, Dr. Bob, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, and it really has been.
Thank you. Well, I was fascinated by this. I mean, I've been a holistic health practitioner focused on oral health, a holistic or biological dentist for over 40 years, and have explored many avenues of dentistry, of airway, of nutritional, environmental science, medicine, lifestyle medicine, etc. But I've never, formally anyway, thought about birth order as a clue as to our behavior. Although, as I said in the introduction, I guess instinctively we're fascinated by birth order and we're fascinated by the differences. And I thought it was so interesting that Dr. Bob drew the distinction between the difference in ages of 3 years and greater than 4 years. Less than 3 years, he would say, between siblings gives a somewhat more cohesive family dynamic, whereas greater than 4 years, and not surprisingly, there are more individual traits that express themselves. But when there's less than 3 years a difference, then, well, he says the only child he would treat more as an adult. But if you are one of three or four children, the oldest, he's found to be very cooperative. The second oldest, you need to explain everything to. This is in a clinical setting. The third, you have to be very gentle because they might be laughing on the outside, but often they're crying on the inside. And a fourth child is all over the place and terribly unreliable. That is from an orthodontic compliance perspective, but we could reflect on that in lots of different ways. And of course, when you think about birth order and family combinations, do you have an older brother or sister? Do you have one or two or three or four siblings? What's the age difference between you? Of course, the combinations are incredible. I mean, I think you mentioned 17 different combinations, but when you factor in age differences, well, actually, if you draw the distinction between less than 3 years and greater than 4 years, I guess 17 combinations of siblings would be possible, I guess. But look, it's so interesting. It's such an interesting insight and gives some formality to what we all explore socially. The book is Life's Fingerprints, Your Birth Order. We'll have links to Dr. Bob's site. I hope this finds you well. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. Feeling stressed, overwhelmed? It's time to unstress your life. Join the Unstress Health community and transform stress into strength. Build mental fitness, from self-sabotage to self-mastery, and together, let's not just survive, but thrive. Expert-led courses, curated podcasts, like-minded community and support, and much more. Visit unstresshealth.com today. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. Content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions.